Matthew Continetti is here, the founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon and the author of The Right, the 100-Year War for American Conservatism. Sir, good to talk to you again.
Hi, Vince. Thanks for having me.
What is going on here? Why is Gen Z so fascinated and enamored by President Trump?
Well, it's interesting. I think Gen Z, as they come of age, their first experiences are with the Biden administration. 4 years of record inflation, record immigration, a broken southern border, and a humiliated United States, whether we were withdrawing for Afghanistan, couldn't prevent the outbreak of war in Ukraine or Israel, a sense that no one was at the wheel. And so young people were receptive to Donald Trump's message at the beginning of the 2024 campaign, and he made the connection through a media strategy that emphasized podcasts, long-form interviews, social media, not just Twitter anymore or X, but TikTok, that appealed to young people. And so when you have that experience of coming of age at a time of high inflation, high interest rates, it's hard to get by, Donald Trump's message of change really struck a chord, and we're seeing that play out now.
To what extent do you also think that this taps into the traditional sort of like anti-establishment sentiment among young people
Right.
who are looking for the rebel, are looking for the guy who's working against the establishment? President Trump has been in an all-out war against that establishment. Has that added to his support?
Oh, I think that's a great point. It used to be that Republicans were kind of the party of rule followers, people who, stayed in line and deferred to authority. Well, that's all changed, and it's changed for a couple reasons. The first is President Trump ran against the Republican establishment just as much as he ran against the Democratic establishment.
Yeah.
And the other reason it's changed is that because of political correctness and woke, it's the Democrats now who are the lecturers, the scolds, the moralists. I think young people are looking for something new, something interesting, ways to rebel. They're now looking at Donald Trump's Republican Party.
Yes. Also, it does seem like President Trump has passed on the authenticity test, which is, you mentioned the podcasts and his ability to go into these long-form environments and have natural conversations with people of all walks of life. I think about a lot the Theo Von interview that he did with the comedian, and he was asking Theo sincerely to explain his experience with cocaine. What was that like? How did you get through it? Did you enjoy it when you were on cocaine? Just a natural conversation between the two men. It was the kind of conversation that I couldn't in a million years envision Kamala Harris having and sounding natural or relaxed.
Well, and not just Harris, who was unable to come to any agreement with Joe Rogan to sit for a similar interview like the 3-hour-plus interview Donald Trump did with Joe Rogan. But think of Joe Biden. Just yesterday, Donald Trump sat for an interview with Bret Baier, parts of which aired during the Super Bowl. Of course, Biden did not do a Super Bowl interview in 2024, and that was one of many mounting signs that he was going to have trouble actually running for a second term. Trump has been more accessible to the press in the first 3 weeks of his presidency, his second term, than Biden was throughout all 4 years of his one term in office.
Yeah.
So I think that's right. The authenticity plays, the accessibility plays, and look, love him or hate him, you always get Donald Trump. I mean, there's no filter, as we say, with President Trump.
Well, there's no mystery. It's complete transparency. It's the thing we all say we want, and then it turns out when he does it, some people don't want it. Hey, on kind of how what's going to happen next. It's always hard in political prognostication to predict the future, but I do think that we're watching as the left is basically refusing to change course right now, Matthew Continetti, in so many ways. Their cable news broadcasts are just as hysterical and anti-Trump and conspiracy theorizing as ever. Their process of picking their leader at the DNC was full of all these really embarrassing moments where they're talking about gender non-binary status and stolen land and emphasizing race and saying that Kamala only lost because she's a black woman. It seems like they're not changing tact at all, actually, in these quarters. To what extent is that going to keep these young voters in Trump's camp, do you think?
Well, I think it will help. The more that the Democrats continue to double down on wokeism and on progressivism and on kind of very obscure cultural issues, most people, including young people, are not going to be able to listen to them. But the other part of it is, too, Donald Trump has to produce results. And I think what a lot of people are expecting is that the change that Donald Trump is pledged and is making real here in Washington will result in a better life for Americans, higher incomes, stable prices, safe streets, better schools, a more peaceful world. If he achieves that in these next 4 years, then I think he may well solidify this connection he's made with the younger generation.
What do you make of the pace? Yeah, obviously, this is the conversation that a lot of us are having right now. Is just he's coming in at unbelievable speed. Clearly, with a lot of people around him who've given a lot of sincere thought to what needs to be fixed within government, how to break through the walls that exist there, and how to do it with such speed that the left can't even concentrate on one thing in order to debilitate it. What do you make of this? Why is it so different this time around?
Well, second terms typically are periods of exhaustion. The staff is tired. The public is kind of looking for something new. This isn't so much Trump's second term as it's his second first term. And it's a second first term with Trump having had 4 years, not only to think about what he wants to do, but to develop the type of lieutenants that he wants to carry out his orders. And this is, I think, is another aspect of this Trump youth movement, Vince, and that is when you look at the people staffing his administration, it's not just the 20-somethings who make up Elon Musk's Doge team. You look at whether it's J.D. Vance, who's 40 years old, or Pete Hegseth, who's in his mid-40s, or Elise Stefanik, who's 44. Marco Rubio is a senior member, and he's almost 60 years old. This is a very young cabinet. What Trump is doing, it seems to me, at all levels of his administration, is picking the next generation of Republican and conservative populist leaders. And that's just another way that his impact and influence will last longer than the second term.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. And he's definitely helped rewire the thinking of so many conservative activists and Republicans about what is possible, what's achievable, and how aggressive you can be. And people value that if you're actually fighting for them.
Yeah, it's all about, I think, willpower, speed, and also, not really listening to the conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. For so many years, it seems, Republicans, once they were elected, began to adopt the manners and attitudes of kind of the permanent establishment here in Washington, including the mainstream media.
Yes.
And Donald Trump's answer to that is a big fat no. And people are listening and liking it.
No question. In fact, one of the ways that I see some of that change is that the right is less prone to give the media a heckler's veto now. It used to be that the right would run in fear of media coverage, New York Times covers, Washington Post, whatever. This past week, the left had really dedicated a lot of its resources and time at going after some of the young people who are working for Elon Musk in this Doge enterprise. And there was a guy who had apparently expressed some anti-Indian views online, and the left had dug it up, and they were able to secure a resignation and got rid of him. But within minutes, all of a sudden, Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and much of the right online said, hey, wait a second. I thought we were beyond that world where the left could decide who we hire and who we fire. We shouldn't let them have that power anymore. And instantly, you had the vice president of the United States saying, I think we should bring him back. It's not an endorsement of his views, but we shouldn't allow the left to have this power. I think we're watching a very big change take place, Matt Continetti.
Well, it's a huge change, and it means that cancel culture is not going to have the same deterring effect on a lot of young people and a lot of people as they express views that maybe they made when they were very young and they came to regret.
Right.
That's no longer going to kind of linger over them as they go through their careers based on Vice President Vance's actions and Elon Musk's rehiring of this individual over the weekend.
And these guys, these young guys in particular, Matt, I've found it so just awful that they're being attacked for being young. That has really been the primary means that the left has decided to attack them, which is pretty funny coming from a political party that has long advocated for letting children become voters and saying that you can chop up your body if you feel like you were born in the wrong one. But if you put a couple of geniuses inside of the government and let them audit the way the government's spending money, that's deeply dangerous now?
Well, when Bill Clinton's boomers, 20 years out of college wanted to reinvent government, it was celebrated. Here are Elon Musk's Gen Zers who are actually doing something about government and changing it. And it's a horror show, according to our media. I think it's another way that the left is exhibiting itself as kind of a out of touch school marmy. And this is just an image I don't think that has broad political appeal at all.
Yeah, me neither. All right. Hey, Matthew Continetti, thank you as always for your great work. Good to talk to you today, sir.